started in 5 minutes, so please take your seats and enjoy the show. Thank you all for coming today.
I can take it. I think, can you check, because I think everybody's in our fine. I ended up going
I am going to be blocking somebody, so I better move.
Okay. Where are you going to be sitting?
I'm going to sit, I think I'm going to have to sit in that,
the weight off.
I think I'm going to have to sit in that third one right there. No, you're fine. But yeah, you're fine.
Thank you.
The Times is sitting right. Oh fuck, he's gonna really block me.
Where are you going to stand?
I didn't think I would. Who are all these people? Who are all these people? I know. I recognize Rupert. He's having fun. I know Murphy. Where's the name? I don't know these. In the names, right?
go ahead and get started. For the candidates, your microphones, I would recommend for the microphones, and I'll leave them on the entire time. I'm not sure about the battery. Okay. So welcome to the Indiana Congressional District 1 Democratic Primary Debate hosted by the Lake and Porter County Young Democrats. I'm Chris Chung. I'll be your moderator for today. I'm joined by Alex Gorman, the chair of our Community Outreach Committee, and Nicholas Fortin, signing people in as the treasurer. Please give them a round of applause. I also want to thank Director Ingrid Norris of the Lake County Public Library System and the Maryville branch for co-hosting this event with us today. Please be sure to check out their other great programming before you leave, including their new partnership with Dolly Parton's Imagination Library program. Let's give them a round of applause. I forgot. We have a lost phone up here, so okay, there it is.
Thank you.
Okay. So for the first time in 36 years, Indiana's 1st Congressional District, which currently comprises 715,000 residents across Lake, Porter, and Western LaPorte counties, will elect a new member of Congress. We thank outgoing Congressman Pete Visclosky for his contributions to our region over the past several decades. His absence will certainly be felt, but in his place, we hope our next representative will proudly represent us all on Capitol Hill. Okay. Candidates are seated in order of federal filing date. The format for today's event will be as follows. Candidates will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. We will start our opening statement order with Mr. Mcdermott, and then proceed to Mr. Harper, and then so on. And for the first question, Mr. Harper will be the first to respond. And then for the second question, Mr. Mervan will be the first to respond, and so on. So if you would like to be the second or third or subsequent person to respond to a question, signal to me, but please do not leave your hand up while another candidate is speaking. I may ask for clarification and for your answer for a response from a candidate if he or she is named by another. We will take a few questions from audience members who submitted one before the deadline, and closing statements will be 2 minutes. Our timekeeper, Alex, will raise this card when 15 seconds remain of your time. For simplicity's sake, I will be addressing each candidate as Mr. or Ms. instead of using formal titles for the 3 elected officials. And in order to stay on time and ask as many questions as possible, we ask that the candidates keep answers to approximately 1 minute and to not answer every question. We ask that the audience save their applause and commentary until the conclusion of our program. And let us begin with opening statements. Mr. Mcdermott to begin.
I want to thank the Lake County Young Democrats, Porter County Young Democrats for putting this event together. And everybody that showed up, thank you very much for being here. It shows great interest in this race. We have great candidates running to replace a great congressman, so thank you for being here. My name is Todd Mcdermott. I'm the mayor of Hammond, Indiana. I've been mayor of that city for 16 years now, just recently elected to my 5th term. Public service is in my family. I've been mayor for 16 years, and I was in the United States Navy for 6 years, for 22 years of public service. It's something that was drilled into me as a child, and it's something that I drill into my children as well. I joined the Navy right out of high school. I was 18 years old. I was enlisted in the United States Navy for 6 years, where I became an electrician on a nuclear submarine, qualified electrician, qualified submariner, and I also became a Navy diver, qualified U.S. Navy diver. After the Navy, I used the GI Bill, which was an excellent program, and went to school at Purdue Northwest, where I graduated in 3.5 years with high honors and a degree of finance. From there, took me to Notre Dame Law School, which was amazing to get accepted there. And the most amazing part is I met my wife at Notre Dame Law School, and actually we were married in the 3rd year. I graduated from that law school. I consider myself one of the best salesmen in the world because I took Marissa McDermott, who grew up in a beautiful part of Port Washington, New York, and I convinced her to move to Northwest Indiana, which she loves, by the way. And I wish she was here with me right now, but as you all know, Marissa's a judge, and she's not allowed to campaign, so I feel like I'm campaigning without my right arm. But I miss you, honey, and I love you. I wish you were here. In her place is my family, though. I have my daughter Lindsay in the room, my brother Brett, my brother Aaron, my sister-in-law Kelly, my sister-in-law Christina. Chase is in law school. Patrick, is his birthday today. He didn't want to do a debate. I love you, Patrick. And my son, Tommy. I'm a baseball coach. I'm a cyclist. I was a teacher at Purdue for 10 plus years. Chairman of the Lake County Democratic Party for 5 years. I raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for candidates, donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to great candidates, including young Democrats, which, by the way, when I was elected, I was a young Democrat. Now I'm a middle-aged Democrat, but I appreciate what you said.
Thank you, Mr. McDermott. That's 2 minutes. Please hold your applause. That's going to take up a lot of time. I apologize. Mr. Harper.
Let's keep it formal, Chris. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jim Harper. I am so excited to see everybody here today. It truly does warm my heart to see so many people come out on a day of inclement weather. This is what democracy looks like, so thank you. I am an attorney and a public defender. I became an attorney and a public defender because I am committed to fighting for everybody in my community. That's why after graduating from Georgetown University Law School and working as a federal clerk in Indianapolis for a federal judge, I moved to New Orleans, Louisiana, and became a public defender there in one of the most understaffed, underfunded public defender's offices in this country. It's also why I worked with several people to help found a national nonprofit law firm that has represented hundreds of injured veterans around this country as they seek to obtain benefits for injuries that they obtained during their service. I'm running for Congress because I think it is absolutely critical that we have somebody like Pete Visclosky who fights for everybody in Northwest Indiana, no matter what community they're from, no matter what their background is. Frankly, no matter whether they're a Republican or Democrat, every person in Northwest Indiana deserves to be treated with respect, and they deserve to have a representative who will fight for them if they have problems with the federal government. But I'm also running for Congress because I know we have really big problems in this country, and I believe that we need big progressive ideas to address those problems. From a president who is lawless and who is undermining our democratic norms, to a healthcare system that still leaves almost 30 million Americans uninsured, to a climate that is in crisis and where we are seeing those impacts not just in far-off places like Australia, but right here in Northwest Indiana. We need big progressive ideas to address those problems. That is why I've consistently supported impeachment. That's why I've advocated for Medicare for all, and that's why I support the goals in the Green New Deal of getting to carbon neutrality by 2050 and investing in green technology here in Northwest Indiana. Thank you all so much for coming.
Please hold your applause. Mr. Mervan.
So the standard has been set that we all stand. I want to thank the Lake and Porter County Young Democrats. Who I am is I'm Frank Mervan. I'm the father of 2, Genevieve and Scarlett Mervan, 17 and 13. I am the husband and dedicated husband to Jane Mervan, who was my high school sweetheart who I met at Morton High School. And I am born and raised in Hammond, Indiana, and my father is a state senator, Frank Mervan, and Jean Mervan. So I know what it is to serve and to understand from a family perspective that in order to stay close to the people, you have to be present. And I want to be a member of Congress, and you're represented in Congress because I have the ability to be a public servant and to connect and be close to the people. And so why I'm here today is because I have proven myself as a North Township trustee. I have looked in the eyes of families who are struggling because they can't afford to pay their rent, have their lights on or their heat on. I've worked with and walked with struggling and striking union workers on the picket lines as they fought for safety, fought for pensions, and fought for good insurances. I have advocated for veterans and not just talked about it. I haven't served, but I have served the veteran community for 15 years. We've done 3 homeless builds for veterans. Currently, today, as we speak, there's a veteran program going on in conjunction with me for the Calumet Township Trustee's Office for homeless veterans. I've participated in the quality of life by transforming Wicker Park as a destination. And most importantly, I want to be a member of Congress and represent you because I want to go there and I want to know and I want to fight for an economy that is shared prosperity, that covers the disparity of our district between Lake Porter and LaPorte County. I want to make sure we have access to health care, access to transportation. My name's Frank Mervan. I thank you for this forum, and I appreciate this time.
Ms. Kamala Reardon. Please hold your applause.
Good morning. I am Mara Candelaria Reardon. Thank you so much for braving the weather here to be here today. This is very important, and I appreciate you being here, and thank you to the Lake County Democrats for putting this event on. Young clearly gets it done. My name is Mara Candelaria Reardon, as I said. I am the 12th District State Representative. In 2006, I was elected as the first Latina to serve in the Indiana General Assembly. In 2018, I was elected by my peers to chair the House Democrat Caucus, a historic caucus that is for the first time in the state's history a majority female caucus. I am region born and bred. I grew up in East Chicago and Munster. I am the proud daughter of a public school teacher, a union leader, and a probation officer. My parents always had a cause. In the 60s, it was the war on poverty. In the 70s, it was the Equal Rights Amendment and the Great Boycott with Cesar Chavez. In the 80s and 90s, they spoke out loudly against the dumping of foreign steel. Political discourse and being engaged in the world around us was expected. So from a very young age, they connected the policies that govern us to the communities that they serve. Because of their influence, I have a strong legislative record of supporting working families, ensuring equal rights for all, protecting our health care and our environment, and supporting public schools and union labor. I'm running for Congress to take those legislative successes to Washington, D.C. by becoming the Congresswoman for the 1st Congressional District. I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Could you please use your microphones? We're being told that in the back it's a little difficult to hear, so please turn them on and hold them. You don't have to stand up. You can sit down if you want. Mr. Farrar.
Hi, I'm Ryan Farrar. And suffering koalas make me cry. Not a joke. Kids in cages make me cry. Every time I hear about another school shooting, it makes me cry. The notion of sending more young men and women to the Middle East to die in a needless war makes me cry. But I'm not running for Congress out of despair, and I'm not hopeless. I'm running because I have hope. I see a presidential election where we have the first time, potentially, to elect a progressive to the White House for the first time since FDR. And it gives me hope because I would love nothing more than to have the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. and have my name associated with landmark legislation, historic legislation like the Green New Deal to save our environment, like Medicare for all to see to that every man, woman, and child in the United States has access to health care coverage. But the number one thing I'm starting with is campaign finance reform. Not an issue I'm necessarily passionate about, but an issue that I consider to be vitally important. Because how are we going to fix problems like climate change, criminal justice reform, healthcare, when we have elected officials throughout Congress that are taking money from the healthcare industry, from petroleum industry, from the for-profit prison industry? It just hasn't been working. Ever since the disastrous Supreme Court decision in Citizens United, we have had a system worse than ever where our officials have been for sale. And I'm going to fight against that. That's one reason why I don't take super PAC money. It's a reason I don't take corporate money. I want to stay pure as much as possible because I want to represent the people. I am a working class person. Union parents. My dad worked for U.S. Steel for 30 years. The region's where I'm from. It's where I'll always be. And I hope that you'll consider letting me represent you in Washington. Thank you.
Ms. Haig.
Good morning. My name is Sabrina Hake, and I'm very happy.
Could you use your microphone, please?
Sure. I assumed everyone could hear me, but maybe not. I'm very grateful to be here, and I'm very grateful to the Young Democrats for putting this together. This is a great opportunity, and the civic engagement that's on display here is just so heartwarming. It's a wonderful thing to see. I am a fifth-generation Hoosier. My ancestors emigrated from Germany in the 1850s to a town that was pretty much all immigrants, Polish, German, and Irish. And they have been there ever since. All of my parents and my ancestors seem to never leave in southern Indiana, and they started a family newspaper that's still in business to this day. I'm very happy to live in the beautiful dunes of Gary, Indiana. It is one of the most beautiful places you'll ever see, certainly the most beautiful place I've ever lived. I'm also a house rehabber, a wife, a lifetime rescue mom, and a nature lover. I've been a lawyer for 26 years. About half of that has been spent as a federal trial lawyer before the U.S. District Court and the Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit. The other half has been as a manufacturing and trademark lawyer, where I was negotiating trade agreements all over the world I actually went to law school for a while in Shanghai and used that when I became a corporate lawyer. And that is part of what's driving my desire to run for Congress and to represent you. We have a serious income gap in this district. We have some areas that are doing very well, but ever since I've been here, it hasn't changed. Gary and Hammond have a very low per capita income, and we need to even that out. I have a specific plan to bring union jobs in manufacturing, construction, and in steel, and in tourism, and it's all related to the same thing, which is the green environment. The numbers associated with the green economy are outstanding, and there's bipartisan support. If we get our messaging right and stop talking about the negativity of climate change and talk about the positives of what it will do for our economy.
Thank you, Ms. Hick.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Borum?
Good morning, or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chris, and the Young Democrats from Lake and Porter County for hosting us today. My name is Melissa Borum, and I am originally from East Chicago, Indiana. I was raised in Maryville, Indiana, and now I'm a resident of Gary, Indiana. I graduated from Maryville High School, and I graduated from Indiana State and also Valpo Law School. While at Valpo Law School, I had the opportunity to work for Congressman Pete Visclosky my 1L year. And then I worked for the Committee House on Appropriations my 2L year. And then I had the opportunity to work for Senator Durbin my 3L year. And so I am very connected and in tune with what happens in Congress. Upon graduation, I have been running state, local, and some federal parts of our government affairs business for a company called AAR. We do maintenance, repair, and overhaul of commercial planes, and we also have a defense contracting part. A lot of people talk about corporate welfare. What I have been able to do is create opportunity for people to bridge skill gaps for a need that is dire in our community. I help connect students in the most needy environments to get an opportunity that we, my company, pay for in sheet metaling. And so I am proud that we employ young individuals throughout our company footprint, and we pay for that. We don't ask the government for help because we understand that we need workforce development pipelines in this country. We need to scale up training in this country. We need to provide transferable workforce development skills in this country so that no matter what type of opportunities we are presented with, we have an opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Borum. Mr. Mosby?
Thank you.
I also want to thank the Young Dems for hosting this. It's very near and dear to me as far as having young people involved in civics. I ran an organization called the Young and Powerful Group out of Chicago, and we raised $250,000 for the election and re-election of President Obama. The reason why I'm running is because as we get prepared to observe Dr. Martin Luther King on Monday, which is also coincidentally my birthday, I've always shared a kindred as far as activism, where I get from my grandmother who used to stop cars because there wasn't a stoplight, because she needed a bus to stop to take people to work. And so my grandmother, years ago, and ever since then, I've always been somebody who's been the part of the problem, part of the solution. And so for me, it is, I went to school on a Pell Grant and $60. I got accepted to Iowa State University, single parent mom, and my mom was an ex-offender. And so I knew that I couldn't call mom for any help. So I worked 2 to 3 jobs a semester, paying my way through college. Now I'm saddled with $70,000 plus in student loan debt that I'm repaying. And my wife is a school teacher of 12 years, and she's saddled with double that with 2 master's degrees. And so understanding how being able to not be grandfathered in or have a role paid for me, we blaze our own trail. And so I might be new to Indiana, but I'm not new to public service with over 25 years of it. I've managed healthcare centers where I've seen patients who have no ability to pay. I have mentored fostered youth, and currently I teach abstinence to 7th graders throughout Northwest Indiana. And so I am excited to be here and looking forward to you getting to know more about me, because one of the things that I appreciate about this is that, you know, we need to make sure we have succession planning, because it shouldn't be that when somebody retires, that who's next. We should be always
Thank
grooming
you,
the next
Mr.
generation of
Mosby.
leaders.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our first question is from Sharon.
Okay, have faith with me. I'm new to this. My name is Sharon Strowski. I am now a resident of Indiana since I retired as a mental health nurse in the state of Illinois for a state employee. And I have seen a lot of stuff, and I am really very concerned about affordable health care for everybody. I have nothing against Obama, but that title sends some people out of it. And the mandate is not necessarily a bad thing, because people do need to have health care when they're young too. So, and you do need to have some way of paying for the funds. I'd like to know what direction all of you are in relation to the affordable health care, and to make sure mental health is included, because that leads to other problems. Thank you.
So could you ask that question we had on paper? Just closing it up. Sorry, just sewing it up.
Oh, okay. Okay, it's the top, the question up at the top, Gallup polls of voters' concerns for 5 straight years. Debate around the availability and affordability of health care has never been more diverse on policy proposals, with Democratic presidential candidates debating Medicare for all versus a public option. While the Fifth Circuit recently ruled that the ACA's individual mandate was unconstitutional, setting up another court battle over ACA/Obamacare. As a member of Congress, what will you do to improve health care availability and affordability?
Question to Mr. Harper.
Chris, now I have 2 questions to answer, so I feel like that's a little, thank you for that question. The number one issue that I hear about as I travel around Northwest Indiana is the lack of affordable health care that many families confront. While we made very important advances with the Affordable Care Act, we still have a long way to go. It remains that 28% of people in this country are uninsured. It remains that the number one cause of bankruptcies in this country is healthcare costs. It remains that nearly 30% of people in this country are underinsured. I am tired of waiting to solve a problem that every other industrialized country in the world has solved long ago. That's why yesterday our campaign announced our comprehensive health care plan. We announced our support for the Medicare for All Act. We want to make sure that every person in this country is insured. That will not only benefit every American who's uninsured right now, it will also benefit all Americans who are underinsured or who have deductibles that are simply unaffordable. Sharon mentioned mental health care. That is an issue that is near and dear to my heart. I can tell you that as a criminal defense attorney, I have seen all too often in too many jurisdictions that the county jail is the number one leading provider of mental health care. The Medicare for All plan that I have advanced, or that I have backed and will vote for in Congress, provides comprehensive care for all levels of need, including mental health care, and I look forward to advocating for it and
Thank
fighting
you,
for it.
Mr. Harper. Does anybody else want to chime in on that? Mr. Farrar, I saw your hand first.
Yeah, the question brings to mind a very interesting thing that we don't often talk about when we're running for office, but realize that when we go to Congress, everything is negotiated, right? We start from our position, we have people on the other side with their position. The reason why the Affordable Care Act was not as successful as it should have been is because, in my opinion, it was a compromise from the beginning, right? They cut out room to keep private insurance intact, but they also wanted to get everybody insurance. They wanted to bring the prices down, and basically what we ended up with was a bill that says everybody's got to buy private insurance. And then the courts struck down that. So, the only thing we really got out of it was protection for pre-existing conditions. A good thing, but we can do so much better. That's why I'm against what people call Medicare for all who want it, because to me that again is a compromise position that you're bringing to the negotiating table. The strongest negotiating position is Medicare for all, as originally written by Bernie Sanders. In my opinion, that's what I support, and that's my take on the issue.
Thank you, Mr. Farrar. Ms. Candelaria Reardon, and then Mr. Morgan. Please hold your applause to keep things moving.
Thank you. Well, I disagree with my friend Ryan here. I believe that we need to support a Medicare for all with a public option as well. I think we need a strong private option. Okay, a strong private option. I believe that we've got an issue where we've got 1 in 4 Hoosiers with diabetes rationing their insulin. We've got 8.3% of Hoosiers without insurance. We've got 8.3%. We've got an attorney general who has joined with other attorneys general to take away the health care of 400,000 Hoosiers. Those are the things that we need to be concerned about. Those are the things that I believe a Medicare for all, those that want it. People have insurance that they're happy with. I think a mandate is unacceptable.
Mr. Morgan.
So one of the facts that we need to know when it comes to Medicare is an administrative cost is about $130 per patient. In private insurance, it's $700. And the reasons why that is because Medicare is allowed to use an economy of scale. They don't have the built-in profit measures. And also, what it is they don't have to market. So there absolutely should be a public option for Medicare that phases into our market so that all of us who have a 401k with insurance companies realize that that market won't drop out. Secondarily, if you have insurance and you enjoy it and you have good health care, you want to be able to keep that. So that negotiation is what's going to go on every single day in Washington because that's real life. You've got to be able to get along with people and you've got to be able to provide a product that people want. You've got to be able to negotiate with the pharmaceutical companies to make sure with Medicare using that leverage to bring that down. And we've got to be able to transition into a system of health that goes instead of volume to value-based preventative medicine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDermott. Please hold your applause.
Nobody needs to tell my family whether or not this is an important issue, because my brother Aaron, who's a small business owner, had trouble for his business getting affordable health care for his family and his employees. And unfortunately for him, well, fortunately for him, Congress and the President of the United States passed the Affordable Health Care Act. I also hate the term Obamacare, ma'am. But if they didn't pass the Affordable Health Care Act, when my nephew Jordan was born, he spent the first 3 weeks of his life in a bubble. And if Aaron didn't have the option of that insurance that was provided through the Affordable Health Care Act, he would have had to do what a lot of other families had to do in traumatic situations like this and file for bankruptcy, which as a practicing lawyer in the Northern District of Indiana, I did hundreds of bankruptcy cases, and 75% of my clients experienced traumatic medical bills and couldn't manage their day-to-day expenses. Were it not for this great legislation passed, my brother Aaron would have been one of those 75%. So I support Medicare for all who need it in America, but I don't support taking it from our unions and the private health insurance plans they have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mosby.
So one of the things that, as President Obama, I don't mind it being called Obamacare, and if Obama makes you nervous, be nervous. You stop. I stand with him, and I'm going to ride it down with him, all right? And I had the opportunity to meet President Obama, and I learned a few things from that man. And so, one of the things that I understand about President Obama, he was a constitutional attorney, lawyer, and scholar. And I have a quote: "The health of the democracy is determined by the health of his people." Now, the ACA wasn't perfect, but one of the things that I think President Obama was trying to do is we can't have a healthy democracy without our people being healthy. Now, when I managed FQHCs, the treatment is a problem. If here in Indiana, if the infant mortality rate, if we are leading an infant mortality rate, and we're 41st in a study by the American Health Rankings, obesity is drug use and smoking, I think that we need to make sure that as we create Medicare for all, that we improve the treatment and the access to it.
Thank you, Mr. Mosby. Ms. Haig.
Thank you. I think the fundamental problem with the health care that we have in our country is that it has a profit motive embedded in it, which makes no sense. How do you abide by a company making a profit off of somebody having cancer or a life-threatening illness? It's absolutely ridiculous, and we need to get rid of the profit motive in healthcare. The other thing is in terms of medication costs. There is a bill pending now, H.R. 3, that would allow the government to negotiate down the price of prescription drug costs for Medicare Part D. That it absolutely has to happen. It's silly that a pill that costs 50 cents in India costs 5 times that in the United States. And people who have to pay out of pocket for the prescription drug costs and for their co-pays are just going broke. So I think if we get rid of the profit motive through Medicare for All, I think that that will address quite a bit of the overhead costs associated with healthcare, as well as eliminating the drug prices.
Thank you. Our next question, please hold your applause. Organized labor has long been integral to the 1st District. Our economy has been dependent on heavy industry, such as steel production, for many decades. Yet automation and globalization have made it easier to produce more with fewer workers than ever before. What will you do to prepare the 1st District for the changing economy, and how does organized labor fit into your plans? Mr. Mervan first, and then Ms. Haig.
The first thing you have to do is you have to have the foresight to be able to invest in trade schools and also infrastructure that is an environment that protects steel industries. So when we talk about our future economy and we talk about globalization and automation of the steel industry, that's what has reduced our number of employees. So we have to have strong trade deals that protect the steel industry. We've got to be able to talk about products that are being made with American steel. We have to be able to invest in our infrastructure. But more importantly, if you want a good economy, you invest in the future through education. You make sure that our automated systems and our children in education are focusing on science and math, so that when they do come out, there are jobs that are available. So the bottom line is you want to be able to invest in the future with children for our economy.
Thank you, Mr. Mervan. Ms. Haig.
The fastest growing segment of the
Could you
United
please use
States
your
economy. The fastest growing sector of the United States economy is the renewable energy sector. Wind and solar are hitting it out of the ballpark. Wind just exceeded $1 trillion as a global business. We are right next to steel mills, right on a port. We should be making those wind towers. They are 90% steel. The foundation, the tower, the rotors, the casing, the nacelle, it's all made of steel. This is my proposal will bring 38,000 manufacturing jobs, and this has bipartisan support. This actually goes back about 6 years from Mitch Daniels' office. And the manufacturing jobs, you can't export them. We have to make it right here where the steel is. The other issue is construction. You can't export those jobs. If we go to a green economy with wind and solar, the estimate on the construction jobs is 40,000. And you can't just install it and leave. Those are ongoing jobs. Look at the counties to the south of us. They've had billions of dollars coming into their economy.
Thank you, Ms. Haig.
Thank you.
Ms. Bora. And then Mr. Harper.
I think it's important to work across party lines, and I'm not sure how many people know that we actually have a grant in the state of Indiana called the Next Level Jobs Grant that will pay for 2 years of training, right? So we have a lot of trades and unions in our area, but we're not sending them to IB Tech to get trained. It's free. So I think we need to do a better job of disseminating information, because you can work with educational institutions, but you can also work with jobs and employers coming in to meet that high demand need for opportunities. So I definitely support, making sure that we have transferable skills, making sure that we are ready for opportunities that are coming our way.
Thank you, Mr. Harper.
One of the biggest challenges that we have in this country right now is the crushing income inequality that we see growing every day. I think all the programs that we're talking about here are great, but I think we also need to think about big federal change in Washington, D.C. to address what I think is an unsustainable issue, and that is the fact that despite the fact that our stock market is at record highs, we have the biggest income inequality that we've ever had in this country. And at the same time, we also have the biggest a growing gender and racial pay gap in this country. Women in this country make 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. So I think that we need to focus on a few things. First and foremost, it's reinvigorating the labor movement in this country, because when we have strong unions, workers have a seat at the table. So I support things like the PRO Act that make it easier to bargain, and also making sure that we are banning right to work at the federal level. But we also need things that lift up all workers. A $15 minimum wage, paid family leave, which will help everybody, and the Paycheck Fairness Act, which will put real teeth into the into employment non-discrimination federal statutes.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. Mr. McDermott.
Question was how to deal with changing the economy and how to make sure that Northwest Indiana unions are part of that changing economy. Well, in the city of Hammond, I've changed the economy since I've been mayor for the last 16 years. Over $900 million in new investment into the city of Hammond, and it's not old technology. It's a data center all around the Oxbow Landing, new economic development, the Cabela's area. Since I've been mayor, I've also pumped over $300 million in infrastructure spending into that 130-year-old city. And while I did all these infrastructure improvements and economic development improvements, I still managed to get the endorsements of the Northwest Indiana Building Trades, the FOP, the firefighters, and the teachers every time I ran for a re-election. So there is a way to bring in new technology, and there's a way to keep Northwest Indiana unions involved and actively, in supporting them as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go on to our next question. Please hold your applause. The Democratic Party takes pride in its broad, heterogeneous base. Yet questions on its commitment to diversity linger since we are seeing so few candidates of color advancing through the presidential primary, 12 years after electing the first black president. What have you done to support diversity, and what will you do as a member of Congress? Question to Ms. Candelaria-Reardon.
Thank you, Chris. So when I was elected in 2006, I looked around at the State House and I said, there's nobody in here that looks like me. Why do we not have interns, lobbyists, other legislators that look like me? So I started a Latino Fellows Program where I bring kids to the State House. I ask every school in the state to submit nominate 5 kids. We bring them to the State House and give them a full day of programming. They get a tour of the Capitol. They get to understand and meet a lobbyist and hear from them. They meet somebody from state government and hear from them. They meet elected officials. And they have a financial aid workshop so they can start thinking about their future. This program works because one of the women that works for me is a graduate of that program. And that's how it's supposed to work. Mentorship and engagement.
Thank you, Ms. Candelaria-Reardon. Ms. Borum.
That's exactly why I'm running. As an African-American woman growing up in Northwest Indiana, I haven't always felt like every door was open for me, or people who look like me, or people who come from the same circumstances as me. And so I think that we have to start locally. We have to elect people locally who are representative of the demographic that we represent. And I think we need to grow from there.
Mr. Mervan, and then Mr. Mosby.
So the reason why I want to address this is because as we approach Martin Luther King's holiday, I just left a breakfast and the comment of judging everyone by the content of their color and not by the color of their skin has to be lived in every single day. And as a North Township trustee, I've looked beyond color, I've looked beyond any kind of boundary and was able to assist people and give them opportunities. So if you want to be able to have a diverse community, you first must be able to live and not just talk about diversity. By doing my job, I have reached out to the Latin community, I've reached out to the African American community, and I have offered opportunities for people to become self-sufficient and to be able to make themselves a better person. So if we all want to get together and we all want to believe or live in a community that is of bringing people together, we have to be able to look beyond color and skin color, and we have to accept each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mosby.
And that's a very important question because when we started Young and Powerful, we started it because we didn't see us in the party. We didn't see ourselves in the party. We decided that as young African American graduates of college that we wanted to fundraise and not be constricted or restricted in our ability to support the president. And as I moved over here to Indiana, one thing became very apparent to me that people, when I said I lived in Indiana, they said, "Are you from Gary?" I was like, "No. I live in Cherville." And as I've started to do the history of the racial past that I think that this region must confront. Like right now, Maryville was Gary 50 years ago. But because of white flight, because of redlining, the state supported discrimination. And we must address those issues here. And as we do consider who we elect to be the next congressman from this district, we have to think about who somebody very cognizant of for everybody. Don't tell me you don't see color, because don't dismiss my ancestry by saying you don't see color. You better see my color.
Thank you, Ms. Haig, and then Mr. Farrar to close.
I feel like we're not mentioning.
Please use your microphone.
Whoops. I feel like we're not mentioning the white elephant in the room. We have a person at the head of our nation who openly encourages people to discriminate against people of color, immigrants, and all other kinds of people. I went to hear Congressman Visclosky at a couple of forums yesterday, and he related a very distressing incident that has not happened in his 36 years in Congress. They take students to the house, the steps of the White House. 3 different groups of students just this year held up a white supremacy symbol for their photograph. He's never seen that. This is coming from the top. We cannot tolerate this kind of behavior, and we can't sanction discriminatory language in any way, shape, or form. I know that we are limited in what we can do about the president, but we can certainly call him out every time we hear it, and that's what I intend to do. Thank you.
Mr. Farrar.
I am privileged. I admit that, because when I look in the mirror, I see somebody looking back at me who has never had to deal with racial discrimination. And it's because of that that I take to heart when I hear about having the will and the courage to stand up for others, people who don't look like me. And that's exactly what I did, because when I was running for state senate in the last election, a community issue happened down where I live, where there was a proposed immigrant detention center run by a for-profit operator that was trying to come into my community. So I led the charge against that. I started the organization No Roselawn Prison. I rallied the community. I took the protest to the county commissioners, and ultimately I was instrumental in getting that shut down. Now, as far as diversification in Congress goes, I am actually, if I were elected, I believe I would be one of the very first openly non-religious people ever elected to Congress. And that's one reason why technically I'm in a religious minority. That's why I have respect for people of all different beliefs. And
Thank you, Mr. Farrar.
The secular leadership I would bring.
Thank you. Our next question, we're going to move on. I'm sorry, we have way more questions on this. Congress is criticized for being a gridlocked, dysfunctional institution, sometimes warranted and other times not. In order to break through and get things accomplished, our next representative will need to negotiate and compromise. Can you name an example when you worked across party lines and ideological divides, and what did you actually accomplish? Question to Mr. Farrar first.
Well, I actually, one of the best examples I just pointed out was I started a movement that put an end to establishing an immigrant detention prison in my community. And now if you don't know, I come from Roselawn. I'm actually just south of the river. It's a very white community. It's a very pro-Trump community. So to rally that community, it took a lot of work. People who support Trump aren't necessarily into, aligning with progressives to fight against things that the president wants. But I was able to do that because I was able to make the case that this is a human rights atrocity and we cannot have it in our communities. We've had similar movements up here in Lake County keeping the GEO group out of here, and I believe it was probably similar types of coalitions. So I've worked with people, hardcore Trump supporters, which I am not, to get things done, and I believe I can continue to do that in Congress.
Ms. Candelaria Reardon.
Thank you. One of the things that I was able to accomplish, and I think when you talk about the divide, I'm one of 149 members in the Indiana General Assembly. So in 2008, when my community of Munster suffered a devastating flood, I was able to work across party lines and convince the other 149 members that we needed to have $14 million included in the Indiana budget to finish the Little Cow River Basin project that was languishing for over 30 years. The legislative process is by its very nature a collaborative process. You have to be able to meet people where they are, understand where they're from. That is why I am one of few Democrats that has been endorsed by the Farm Bureau, because I understand and recognize that what their communities needs. So I believe that we all need to continue to work together. Like I said, it's a collaborative process.
Thank you, Ms. Condler. Mr. McDermott, Mr. Harper, Ms. Borum, and then we're capping this at 4 or 5 people per question because we really need to get moving.
Bipartisanship is something that's important to me. It's something I'm campaigning on. When I served on that nuclear submarine with the 150 other sailors at that time, I'd say 75% of them were Republican. They trusted me with their life, and I trusted them with mine. We had a problem in Hammond, Indiana, when the coal mill right on the state line shut down, the state line generator. We all wondered what we were going to do with that coal plant. It happened to be one of the most high-profile economic development pieces in Indiana, not just Northwest Indiana. I worked across the aisle with Governor Holcomb, and him and I worked together to help bring in that data center to Hammond, Indiana. It's bringing in tech jobs to our city. It's bringing in investment in our city, $100 million to start, and up to $200 million if everything goes as we anticipate. That's working across the aisle. Governor Holcomb with Mayor McDermott with Governor Holcomb, and we got stuff done.
Mr. Harper.
I, like all of us, recognize the value of bipartisanship. I can tell you, I come from a bipartisan family. My mom was an elected judge, Republican elected judge for 35 years. My dad was a Democratic prosecutor and county commissioner. They made it work for a little while. I recognize the value of bipartisanship. I will also say, though, I reject the idea that the reason that there is gridlock in Congress is because Democrats aren't willing to work with Republicans. No, the reason that there is gridlock in Congress is because people like Mitch McConnell pledged that his first job was to make sure that Barack Obama was a one-term president. So while we absolutely have to reach our hand across the aisle and engage with our Republican friends and try and find consensus, one thing that I will do is stick to my principles, fight for our democratic values, fight for bold progressive change on issues like healthcare, on issues like standing up to a president who is corroding our political system, and on issues like climate change.
Thank you, Ms. Borum, to close.
Thank you, Chris. I think I am one of the very few people who have a federal legislation that is actually passed and signed into law by the president. So we, with a group of business leaders and industry leaders from the aviation industry, we passed the reauthorization bill of 2018. What that helped do was create opportunities for pilot pipelines, maintenance, aviation maintenance pipelines, and also help with efficiencies, with limiting government spending, right? Making sure that we are really bargaining our dollars and not overspending our tax dollars. For example, when the RFP comes out and says that you need to spend $600 million on 2 planes that are new, but the government doesn't spend or utilize the full life size of the plane. So why do we need to spend $600 million when we can spend $300 million? And we were able to accomplish that. And I worked across party lines to get that done with congressional members and senators from across the country. Thank you.
Chris, if I could, this is a very important issue, and I just didn't raise my hand fast enough because bipartisan is important. So if I can get my minute. The proudest accomplishment that I've had that came across party lines was my No More Secrets campaign. Indiana was ranked 2nd in the United States for child sexual abuse reported cases. My wife was a survivor. Her sister was a survivor, and she's no longer with us. She left 3 kids behind. And we went into the schools, and we brought a coalition of people together, and we went with survivors, Child Protective Services, Fairhaven, which is the Rape Crisis Center. We worked with the Times, the U.S. District Attorney's Office, and we educated kids about body safety and how predators push boundaries. Every day in the newspaper, you read about a child molester getting arrested or prosecuted. This is an epidemic that goes on. We went in front of 11,000 kids. We had 73 who came forward. We went to Indianapolis. We changed the law. And what stopped it at one point was a chairman of a committee who was a Republican finally came to terms with that his daughter, who was a survivor, he had a moment of truth. Once he discovered what we were able to do in the schools,
thank you.
We passed the law, and it's now mandatory education in our schools throughout the state of Indiana. Thank you.
Thank you. We have to move on. Our next question, according to the 2019 Social Security Trustees Report, the trusts are scheduled to run out of new funding in or around 2035, which translates to a revenue drop for retirement and survivor benefits of about 20%. But with a rapidly swelling budget deficit and federal debt, what will you do, if anything, as our next member of Congress to protect Social Security as well as America's fiscal health? Question to Ms. Hake. Microphone.
I'm so used to addressing a jury in a courtroom, we don't have microphones typically, and I'm sorry about that, but I'll try to remember. Social Security, I'm tired of hearing people refer to Social Security as an entitlement. In fact, I've heard this administration call it an entitlement. We have all paid into Social Security. That is our money. One of the things that we can do, first of all, the scenario, I think needs to be a little tweaked. We are actually earning interest on our Social Security funds at this point because more people are paying in than are drawing out. That is going to shift with demographic shifts, but it's not the doomsday that I think everybody's hearing because nobody hears about the interest. One of the things I would do would be to get rid of the cap. People stop paying Social Security after a certain amount of income. I think it's about $180,000. I don't see the reason for that. If we would just extend that on, why not pay Social Security on everything you earn? It's a way of giving money back to the people who are paying in, and it's a tax break for the wealthy if you think about it. So that would be one of the main things I would do to shore up Social Security. And the nomenclature matters too. It is not an entitlement. It's our money, and I'm sure it will be protected. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harper?
If I am in Congress, there are two things that you will not see me vote for. One is an increase in the retirement age, and the other is any reduction in Social Security benefits. I absolutely agree with Sabrina that the first thing that we should do is remove the cap on the FICA tax. It is a regressive tax that taxes people at lower incomes much more than people at higher incomes. Now, if that's not enough, and if we still have stability problems, although I do think that will extend the solvency of Social Security by several years, then we need to look at ways that we can reduce costs in the system or potentially increase revenue. I think programs, frankly, like Medicare for All that we've advocated for, will reduce the cost of other entitlement programs like Medicare. That will also create some savings that we can use to support programs like Social Security. We made this promise to our seniors, frankly to ourselves, and we need to keep that promise going forward.
Thank you. Mr. Mosby to close.
All right, and point of information that don't give Sabrina credit for that. I attended 2 of the forums, Congressman Visclosky, and he threw us that bone about removing the caps. So don't give her credit for that one.
It was my idea also.
Yeah, so give that one to the congressman, outgoing congressman. And so I think one of the other things as we grow the economy, I'm here to fight. Hey, let's go. So one of the things that also as we grow the labor pool, there's a bill in Congress, stuck in Congress right now, HR 1043, which is the Employer Participation and Repayment Act. I think that allows businesses to repay student loans for their employees. I think that one way we grow the economy is we help business out with those kind of inducements to pay off student loans as a way to how we grow the economy so that we don't have to worry about the solvency of the trust fund.
Thank you. Our next question. The past 5 years and the last decade were the warmest ever recorded. With extreme weather events more common and dangerous than ever, climate change has never been more imminent than now. Proposals like the Green New Deal aim for net zero emissions by 2030, while other proposals aim for global net zero by 2050. What do you believe is the way forward for U.S. climate policy, and as our next member of Congress, how do you plan to get there? Question to Ms. Borum first.
I definitely agree with portions of the Green New Deal. I think that the economic development opportunity is really amazing in what it can do and bring opportunity to this congressional district. I also live in Miller, and we are actually seeing the effects of erosion along our lakeshore. We have visibly less lake beach area than we did before, and as you go up Beverly Shores, you are seeing homes dangerously close to the lake. And so I think we definitely need to address those issues, and I think that it is right that Porter County has made this a national disaster.
Ms. Haig, then Mr. McDermott.
If you take nothing home from me today, please take this. The messaging on climate change is so crucial. Those of us who understand it know that we don't have 5 years to argue about it. When we started this campaign and we talked about climate change, which was the central component, we got doors in our face. When we started talking about the green economy and the thousands of jobs, the manufacturing jobs that are supported by the Republicans, if we make the steel casings here for the wind towers, all the solar components that are imported we should be making here, and the construction jobs. Everything changes. Messaging is so crucial. It is so crucial that we get this right, and we start talking about the economic benefits of going green. That will transform our economy, and especially in Northwest Indiana, because we're right on a port, we're right on steel mills. When we start to convert and upgrade our infrastructure, we will be addressing our Paris commitments, but we'll also be transforming our economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDermott and Mr. Murdan.
Every summer, California burns. We had the Amazon rainforest on fire this summer as well. Right now, Australia is on fire. We have storms of the century every 2 or 3 years, flooding because we have infrastructure that can't handle this. Right here on our own lakefront in Northwest Indiana, from Portage all the way to the state line, we have major problems. Climate change is happening, and we all know it. It's the other party that has to get that through their head, all right? I support the Paris Climate Accords. I think we should rejoin it immediately. I think it's embarrassing that one of the strongest countries in the world, one of the best countries in the world, is not part of that. I believe in certain parts of the Green New Deal, but I get worried if we implement the Green New Deal 100%, that we're putting ourselves and our workers at a competitive disadvantage with other countries that aren't implementing the Green New Deal. We're in a crisis. We need to fix it. I know our party's ready to do the fighting. Thank you.
Mr. Murdan, Farrar, and then Ms. Condelaria, we're going to close.
The most important thing that we have to understand is with climate control is that we live in an industrialized area. And we have to be able to begin working with the steel mills to make sure offering incentives that offer scrubbers so we reduce our carbon monoxide in our community. The erosion is absolutely going on. We have a national park and there are private homeowners that are losing value in their homes because of the increase of the water, and that has to be addressed. So when we talk about climate control, we have to be able to live in an environment and be able to provide incentives that reduce the carbon footprint within our community. Rail is one of those. So climate control is absolutely real. We have to use American steel. And when we talk about the Paris Accord, we have to understand, as the mayor mentioned, North Korea is even in the climate control. America is not. Every country, developed country in the United Nations is in it except America. For ourselves, for our future, we've got to be able to protect our environment. Climate control is real, and we've got to be able to fight for that and be able to protect ourselves.
Mr. Farrar.
You know, one of the things I really get tired of hearing from people that oppose the Green New Deal is it's not going to do any good because we can't make China stop polluting. We can't make India stop polluting. Well, my response to that is, I thought we were supposed to be the leaders. Are we not the leaders in the world? Did we not lead innovation, right, when we had to oppose Hitler and we had to industrialize rapidly to be able to stand up against that threat? What about when John Kennedy said we could put a man on the moon and people thought that was crazy? Well, now we have a threat to the survival of our own civilization. And it's time that America stands up and leads again. When we show the rest of the world what can be done with renewable energy, maybe they'll follow our lead. Maybe when China and India sees that it can be profitable and still we can save the planet, maybe they'll do what we do too. It's time that we stand up, that we step up, and we be the leaders of the world that we're supposed to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Condelaria. We're going to close.
Thank you. I agree. I'm going to be fast. The Paris Climate Accords, absolutely. We need to get back into that agreement. Negotiated trade agreements also need to include a climate change component. The Green New Deal, absolutely. Public transit, supporting rail, yes. Our single biggest opportunity for economic development is green technology. You have seen an economy grow in the tech sector with mobile devices. That is the kind of economy that we can have when we invest in the entrepreneurial spirit of Americans that developed green technologies.
Thank you. Our next question, President Trump's recent strike against Iranian General Qasem Soleimani has drawn praise from Republicans, but criticism from Democrats as a major escalation in the Middle East. Some have made comparisons to the beginnings of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, arguing that the American public is being deliberately misled. Approximately 6,700 Americans were killed in both of those wars and well over 50,000 wounded. What is your view of what needs to happen next between the U.S. and Iran? Question first to Mr. Mosby.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm running. My 6-year-old, I'm embarrassed for my son to watch the TV when the president's on. I mean, and so I think that We need to stop trying to police the world. I think that there's definitely some things domestically we need to be taken care of. But I think that we ought to be out of Iran and Iraq. I was never a supporter of those wars. And I think that we need to bring our troops home.
Thank you. Mrs. Haig?
I think that this administration's habit of making foreign policy decisions without consulting with the national security team and without getting congressional approval is absolutely rogue, and it's extremely dangerous. We pulled out of Syria without any advice from our security advisors, and we left the Kurds to slaughter. Trump met with North Korea, Kim Jong-un, for nothing in return. We got no benefit from that. And now Kim Jong-un is flaunting his new weapon that he's going to introduce us to. The assault on Soleimani was done from Iraqi sovereign soil. What an insult to Iraq. And then they turned around and voted to exclude our military, undoing how many years of investment? We've spent over $5 trillion in Iraq, and now they want us out. Congress needs to approve any declaration of war. You cannot go in and assassinate a leader of a country without getting congressional approval. It has taken us to the brink of another war, and we need to check it. Congress needs to stand up and say, you cannot do this. He also used money for the wall that was appropriated to the U.S. military.
Mr. Farrar, Harper, and McDermott to close.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what Sabrina just said, and in fact, I believe Trump committed yet another impeachable offense when he gave an order to assassinate a foreign national, a foreign leader, without even notifying the Gang of Eight. So if you elect me, I would not only have voted on the last impeachment, I'll be voting yes on the next impeachment. Now, it's really important to me because the thing that inspired me to get involved in politics to begin with was as a young man, I watched our country be led to war based on lies. I followed independent media at the time. I knew the truth about what was happening in Iraq, and there was not weapons of mass destruction. There was no evidence of weapons of mass destruction, but we were led to go to war with a nation that never attacked us based on lies. And I said, if there's anything I can do with my life, it's put myself in a position that I can have a say that never, ever happens again. And here we are, and here I am. And if you elect me, I will do everything I can to advocate for peace and no more wars in the Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harper, then Mr. McDermott to close.
We must avoid another endless war in the Middle East. Chris, the statistics that you posed about the number of men and women who have gone to fight and those who have not come back in the Middle East wars is absolutely jarring. Now listen, I'm clear-eyed about the threat that Iran poses. I know that there are some issues that we have with that government right now. But from day one, this president has moved us closer to a war with Iran. When he took office, we had the JCPOA in place, and we had some semblance of a diplomatic dialogue with the country. Now we are on the verge of war because of his reckless actions. I would support a few things. First and foremost, we must repeal the open-ended AUMF authorization for use of military force, which has been used to justify sending far too many men and women to the Middle East. We also need to pass a resolution under the War Powers Act, taking back Congress's authority and telling this president that if he's going to do anything else, he needs to come to Congress. It is time to end these endless wars.
Thank you, Mr. McDermott to close.
As a veteran who served when I was 18 years old and it was my chance to serve, I raised my right arm and I gave 6 years of my life up to the United States of America, risking my life on a daily basis. And I talk to a lot of veterans about this issue as well. And it's hard for us to justify somebody like the president, when it was his turn to stand up and go fight, he came up with an ailment that prevented him from doing so. And yet, since taking over in the White House, he's one of the bigger bullies in the world stage. And he's very free to throw our men and women in harm's way. I think it's abhorrent that we are offensively attacking another country in a third-party country. I think that the president taking these actions without consulting with Congress and keeping Congress in the loop is just a total disrespect for Congress. I think Congress has an absolute important role to play in these decisions, and this could easily lead to another war, which would cost trillions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of lives possibly, and to do it without congressional consultation is embarrassing.
As a reminder, we are capping responses to 5 candidates, and our next question will be asked by Casper.
Hi, my name is Casper Mendoza. I'm from Lowell, Indiana, and I am the chair of Lake County March for Our Lives, which is a student-run anti-gun violence organization. My question is, according to data from the Gun Violence Archive, 2019 saw the most mass shootings ever recorded at 417. Mass shootings have prompted bold policy proposals, many of which are unthinkable just a few election cycles ago. The American public holds diverse views on what should happen next, whether universal background checks, a ban on assault weapons, a federal red flag law, a weapons registry, or stricter criminal penalties against those whose guns are used in crimes. Which of those, or what other proposals, do you see as the most important step that Congress must take, if any, regarding gun violence?
Thank you. Question to Mr. McDermott first, and then Ms. Candelaria, Reardon, Mervan, and Borum to close.
I remember when Columbine happened. I was in law school with Marissa, and we sat there staring stunned at the TV that somebody would bring a weapon into one of our schools and slaughter their fellow classmates. And now, unfortunately for all of us, it's become a weekly, monthly tragedy that happens all too frequently. We all know something needs to be done. The question is, while respecting the Second Amendment, what can we get done and also not be the party that wants to take away your guns and violate the Second Amendment? That's why I want to point out one thing. I'm a license holder of a weapon for self-protection, so I'm not looking to repeal the Second Amendment. But however, I do support an assault weapons ban. These weapons were made to kill other people. When our soldiers carry them in Iraq and Afghanistan, I understand that. I don't understand why when we raid a house in Hammond, Indiana, and we have a resident that has multi-assault weapons, why do you need those in Hammond, Indiana? We're not in the streets of Afghanistan. I support red flag laws to take weapons away from people that worry you, and I also want to close the gun show loophole. We have a gun show loophole right here in the Northwest Indiana that's violated constantly.
Ms. Candelaria, Reardon.
Thank you. I too support responsible gun legislation. I think it's important that we have universal background checks at every point of sale. That's if you sell it to your brother, to your uncle, everybody should have a background check. We need responsible gun storage so we can ensure that children are not getting guns that are not stored properly by lawfully carrying individuals. We need to disarm domestic abusers. This is a topic that hit very close to home. A very good friend of mine was his children were in the Noblesville school the day of the Noblesville shooting. We recently on the State House floor honored the teacher who took a bullet. Teachers should not be taking bullets for their students. They should be educating them in the classroom. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Borum.
Thank you, Chris. So, gun violence really affects me in my life. I have had cousins who were gunned down like they were nothing. And so I definitely support a more comprehensive and universal background check. I also support not having assault rifles on the streets. You cannot hunt with them. There's no reason to have them in our homes. So I don't want to repeal the Second Amendment, but I definitely think we need to do a better job of managing the guns that we have on the street and who we allow to get those guns.
Thank you, Mr. Mervan, to close.
The reason why this is important, because if you read the newspaper, the Hammond Times is running an article each and every day about the number of homicides that we have in our community based on the 15th day of January. There's been 10 homicides. So what they're looking for is a leader. They're looking for someone locally to be able to identify that and to be able to go to Washington and make changes. What I'm going to do on a local level is I just met earlier this morning with Burgess Peoples. The local faith-based community, myself and Kim Robinson are going to put together a gun buyback program that hopefully will be able to have the same results that they had in Chicago. As far as the federal policy, you want to be able to have a congressman that goes there and talks specifically about protecting people. If a judge says someone is dangerous or harm to themselves or others, they shouldn't have a gun. You've got to close the loophole. If a boyfriend gets convicted of domestic violence, you've got to be able to take a gun away from him just like you do a husband or anyone else. And if a minor gets convicted of a felony with a gun, he shouldn't be able to turn 18 and get a gun. We need to have a federal law that protects us from that and protects people who are bad people who have guns. Thank you.
Thank you, Casper, for that question. Our next question is around criminal justice reform. It has been a key issue in the Democratic presidential primary between eliminating private prisons, legalizing marijuana, and adopting strict standards for the police use of force. Do you find it important to reduce racial disparities in the criminal justice system? And specifically, what will you do as our next member of Congress? First question to Mr. Harper.
Criminal justice reform is an issue that I care deeply about. It is why, as I mentioned earlier, after graduating from law school, I didn't go to work at a law firm. I went to New Orleans, Louisiana, and worked in one of the most underfunded public defender's offices in the country. I can tell you that I saw firsthand the racial disparity in our criminal justice system. New Orleans is a city that's about 50-50 African American white. 95% of my clients were black. That is because there are systemic injustices in our criminal justice system, not only in who is arrested, but then obviously who can afford private counsel. It is time that we get rid of the profit motives in our criminal justice system. So as Chris mentioned, that means getting rid of private prisons. I would absolutely vote for legislation to do that. I've also seen firsthand the racial disparities in our marijuana laws. I represented a client who was sentenced, no exaggeration, to 20 years in prison because he had 2 joints. It's time not only to legalize medicinal marijuana, it's time to legalize recreational marijuana. Tax it, regulate it. Let's join with our neighbors in Illinois and Michigan. It is time for fundamental...
Thank you, Mr. Harper. Thank you. Mr. Farrar, Mr. Mosby, and then Ms. Borum to close.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything Jim just said, and that reflects a lot of my own positions. When I was pursuing my undergraduate degree, a lot of my research, a lot of my time studying was on criminal justice reform. I believe it's immoral to put nonviolent offenders in prison. To me, prison is to remove people who are a threat to society. Nonviolent people generally are not a threat to society. They don't belong in prison. You know, the cannabis plant is far less addictive and dangerous than substances that are already legal. There's absolutely no reason it should still be illegal. It was only made illegal originally in the 30s or 40s because the cotton companies didn't want to compete with hemp as a textile, so they created a lot of false information, got the laws changed. Then Richard Nixon came along and established the DEA and classified cannabis next to heroin and cocaine because he had a grudge against hippies because they didn't vote for him. And that's still the law of the land. How ridiculous is that? We got to change it. I will fight to change it because I believe it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farrar. We're actually going to close with Ms. Haig because I did think I saw her hand, but not right after Mosby and Borum.
All right, so I think that one, we need to eliminate the prison industries. The whole profit motive behind prisons is ludicrous. In addition to that, I think that the prisoner pipeline is real. I've gone to LCJC, and it's so embarrassing that when I'm talking to these young men, that if I had a room once full of 15 young men, all minors, and 8 of them all came from the same community. All of them, young African-American males. And it wasn't their first rodeo. And I think that we have to eliminate that. I mean, even myself, even though I live in Sheriffville, anytime that I'm driving and a cop car gets behind me, I'm scared too. Me too. I mean, so we have to recognize the racial profiling that does happen, and when we talk about mental health and the traumatic experiences that people have went through, those issues are real. And so I think not only that, and then restorative justice practices. I think that federal funding should be given to any school. If they're Title I school, they should have restorative justice funding.
Thank you, Mr. Mosby. Ms. Borum.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So I definitely support criminal justice reform and overcoming the systemic issues that we have in the African American community. No one has been impacted more than the African American community. It has torn down our family structure. The war on drugs, 3 strikes and you're out and you go to jail. This is why we have so many African American men not in the homes of our children. And if they're not in the homes of our children, who is helping the mother with those children? We need to do better with criminal justice reform.
Thank you, Ms. Haig, to close.
Thank you. I actually agree with Ryan and Jim that part of the issue is that marijuana remains illegal in the state, which is silly. The other thing is that I started out in criminal justice before I became a lawyer, and people need to understand that prisons breed predators. They do not get out of a long time sentence friendly and adjusted. They get out maladjusted. And we need to be very circumspect about the people we're sending to prison. I completely agree with Mr. Farrar that we should not be sending nonviolent offenders to prison because we're creating people who will end up victimizing people when they get out. So that's the #1 issue. Juvenile offenders, mentally ill offenders, and nonviolent offenders should not be occupying our cell. We're also paying a lot of money to house them, and it's to our detriment. So that would be the first thing I would do, would be to get that population out of prison. They can do work release. They can do something else that's constructive. Sitting in a cell doesn't do anything but breed predators. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haig. Our next question. President Trump is the third U.S. president in history to be impeached. Local media has covered where some of the candidates stand on the impeachment process and how they would have voted. Congressman Visclosky voted in favor of both articles of impeachment. Would your approach have differed from or been the same as his, and why? Question to Mr. Mervan first.
I am for impeachment. I'm for the process to go forward. Anyone who has followed it from an outsider's perspective has to understand that the impeachment process is something that's going to go forward, and if our president does not follow the Constitution and the laws, then he may face the penalties.
Thank you, Mr. Harper.
Yeah, so I've consistently supported impeachment from the beginning. It's been clear for months that our president violated the law and has been undermining our democratic norms. And I think it's important that I've been consistent on supporting impeachment since that time. We need a representative in Congress who is going to stick by their principles on really important issues. And the evidence has been clear. I'm glad that Congressman Visclosky has done that, and if I'm a representative, not only on this issue of impeachment, but on other issues, I will stick with my principles. We have to defend the rule of law in this country.
Mr. Farrar.
Yeah, personally, I don't think Donald Trump should have ever been allowed on a ballot to run for president because he was never willing to release his tax returns, which he is still hiding. What is he hiding? All right, he said he was waiting for the audit to finish. It's like, hello, IRS, were you listening? We've been waiting for this audit to finish for 3 years now, and I've heard nothing about it. And I mean, he's taken it all the way to the Supreme Court to continue to conceal whatever the hell he's hiding in those tax returns. So to me, he's an invalid president to begin with. He never deserved to serve. He's a threat to our national security, and I believe he did commit impeachable offenses, particularly obstructing Congress. You know, in every other prior impeachment, all of the documents were turned over. Congress was allowed access to all the witnesses. He is just blatantly breaking the rule of law and stepping all over Congress, and it needs to stop. And I will be hardcore fighting to make it stop if I have the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Condelaria Reardon.
Thank you. I too have been supportive of impeachment because I know as a legislator that it is our legislative responsibility to question the actions of the executive branch when necessary. We have that responsibility as legislators, and I truly believe that everybody should be held accountable. I have never been afraid to speak truth to power. And our democracy is in crisis. Our democracy is in crisis because of the actions of this president.
Mr. McDermott to close.
As far as sticking with my principles, when I was 18 years old, I raised my right hand and gave 6 years to the Constitution of the United States and the United States of America. And whether we like it or not, there's a lot of people in this congressional district and a lot of people in this country that thinks that the Democratic Party made a mistake by doing what they did, not because what the president did was constitutional, it wasn't, because of the final score. If we all knew what the score of the Super Bowl was going to be in 2 weeks, would half the people that are going to watch it actually watch it? We have senators out there openly saying, I'm never going to remove this president, and they control the Senate. We're giving the president of the United States the ability to go out there and tell everybody he was acquitted when it's a joke. He's not going to have a real trial in the Senate. It's going to be a kangaroo court, which is embarrassing. I would have hoped that we went with the censure immediately, and then I hope that Nancy Pelosi would just leave him impeached forever and never send the articles of impeachment over to the Senate, because it's embarrassing what's about to happen in the Senate. It's a Super Bowl that we know the final score to already, and that's not right either.
Thank you. Just to clarify, Mr. McDermott, would you have voted in favor of both articles?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I would have tried to dissuade the could I respond to your question? I would have tried to dissuade the party and use the censure instead, and then once it was determined that the censure was not going to work and we were going forward with the impeachment, I would have voted to impeach. I would have voted to impeach. Let me make that clear.
Thank you. Our next question. Thank you. Please hold your applause. President Trump's approach to immigration policy has been characterized by many as vindictive for proposals like banning migration from certain Muslim-majority countries, denying asylum under the Remain in Mexico policy, family separation, and an obsessive focus on the construction of a border wall with Mexico. Yet most congressional Republicans have been unwilling to negotiate to make progress on immigration, unlike the Gang of Eight in 2013. What is your approach to immigration policy, and how do you believe you can get it accomplished as our next member of Congress? Question to Ms. Candelaria Reardon first.
Thank you. I have been supportive of the DREAM Act since it was first introduced in 2001 by Representative Luis Gutierrez from Chicago. I believe that this country has to decide, do we value the people that come here and that come here for a better life? Do we believe the words on the Statue of Liberty? Because our actions do not reflect it. Our actions do not reflect it by putting kids in cages and separating them from their families. 5,400 kids to date have been separated by their families, from their families. It's unconscionable. And we need to move forward with some comprehensive immigration reform that values the workers that we so desperately need in this country.
Thank you, Ms. Haig.
I think that at the base of our immigration policy from this administration lies racism. His entire family, his wife and her parents, are immigrants. My family came over here in the 1850s. We were all immigrants. His punitive policies affect brown people and Muslims and black people. They do not affect the immigrations from other countries that don't look like them. I don't think there can be any question about what he's doing and the motive behind it. I don't agree with caging kids. It's embarrassing. We were founded on the notion of everybody coming over for a better chance. We have a Statue of Liberty that says just the opposite of what the wall says. We need to get back to our core values of valuing people and immigrants and recognizing that we are a nation of immigrants. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farrar, Ms. Forum, Mr. Harper, and then Mervan to close.
First of all, the wall won't work, okay? No matter what Trump says about it being the perfect, unstoppable wall, guess what? People know how to climb. People know how to tunnel under. People have power tools. They can get through it, okay? We know the drugs aren't coming through the desert. They're coming through ports of entry, okay? So that's number one. But number two, my approach to immigration is we've got to look at the underlying root causes, why these people are wanting into our country to begin with, which, by the way, they should be allowed to declare asylum when they get here. That's international law, and this president has been violating that law. Maybe even another impeachable offense, quite frankly. But it's the drug cartels, right? Because we have this robust black market for drugs in our country. We've empowered drug cartels in South and Central America. They're running the show down there. They don't have respect for government. They're terrorizing their citizens who are fleeing to us, who we've caused their problem. If you vote for me, I'm going to fight to change that. We're going to end the cause of this immigration crisis to begin with. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Forum.
Well, first and foremost, I will respectfully disagree that America was founded on the opportunity for economic development, considering I'm an African-American female. Next, I think it is criminal when you take children away from their parents and separate them. How distraught these families must be. I recently spoke to River Forest School in Lake Station, and I didn't realize the Hispanic population, and I didn't realize how many students were affected by their family members being drugged out of their homes in the middle of the day. I think it is criminal, and I think that we need to hold the administration accountable for what they are doing.
Thank you, Mr. Harper, then Mr. Mervan to close.
I think, like everybody in this room, that I find it fundamentally inhumane and emotionally jarring and moving what we've seen this administration do. I think all of us up here would agree that we need somebody in Congress who's going to push back forcefully against these inhumane policies. That is not the values that this country should stand for. But let's also talk about ways that we can start to change the conversation and really respect the value of immigrants. Immigrants are critical to our economy. Immigration is critical to our economy. So I would support several policies that respect that. First and foremost, absolutely we need a DREAM Act. Absolutely we need to modify DACA. We also need comprehensive immigration reform, most importantly, that includes a pathway to citizenship. And finally, we need to do things that make sure that the immigrants who are in this country are respected and that they are able to take advantage of all the opportunities that other Americans have. That means making sure that they have access to things like driver's licenses and making sure that they have access to the same healthcare benefits just like other taxpayers.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. Mr. Mervan to close.
So I'm going to bring this local, and I'm going to be quick and to the point. The day after election in November, when President Trump was elected, I went to the Immigration Center in East Chicago. It was there I met my friend Myra Rodriguez Alvarez, who's an immigration attorney, and we talked about within the township what we can do to help the immigrant community. And what we did is we created a partnership in my office that was able to help people. Examples, real life examples. An East Chicago Central student, the school city contacted us. They were about to be deported because their Dream Act was going to be expired. Myra, myself, and Catholic Charities Immigration Center worked to keep that individual in school who's now a Valparaiso student. Secondly, the St. Jude House. There was an Arabic individual who was divorcing her husband from domestic violence. She couldn't return back because she was going to be almost killed because she divorced her husband. We worked with the St. Jude House and the Catholic Charities to keep her safe in this community. That's what immigration. We all want to live in a country that is safe from violent people, and we all want to make sure that we act and not just pass resolutions to protect people in the immigration community.
A Pew Research poll from last week found that 61% of Americans say there's too much income inequality. The 2017 tax law was widely derided as a giveaway to corporations and the wealthy at the expense of working class taxpayers. How would you change the tax code, or what would you change about the tax code? And as our next member of Congress, how would you go about earning support for those changes? Question first to Mr. Farrar.
Well, for me, I believe that the tax code worked best for the working people of this country, probably in the 1950s, under Republican General Dwight Eisenhower. Back then, the wealthiest Americans were taxed at a rate of about 90%. That's a far cry from what we're asking the wealthiest to pay today. I'm not necessarily saying I would advocate that in my first year in Congress we move back to those rates. There would be a little bit of pushback, I think. But there's no doubt the wealthiest of this country need to pay their fair share. You know, we've had several economic recessions in recent memory, and it all happens after an incoming Republican president comes in and passes a huge tax break for the wealthy. You know, I remember right after I graduated college in 2009, we were suffering through the recession because of the Bush tax cuts, okay? Our economy doesn't work when the wealthiest don't pay their fair share. And that's gonna be my approach to fighting income inequality in this country.
Thank you, Mr. Farrar. Mr. Mervan, then Mr. Harper.
As I mentioned earlier, shared prosperity and also shared taxation. If we were to implement a tax of 2% over people who make more than $50 million, that would generate $2 billion. That would give us an opportunity for universal child care. That would give us an opportunity for child development courses. And as the North Township trustee, I've seen the benefit of not only child care, but early childhood development by investing in programs like that as parents as teachers. We have had hundreds of families who have participated in a Parents as Teachers program that gets the kids from 0 or 1 month to 5 years. And those individuals show better outcomes. So if you're going to break the chain of poverty and you're going to be able to make productive citizens, you've got to be able to invest in programs in kids, in youth that makes differences. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harper, then Mr. McDermott to close.
The income inequality that we have in this country is unsustainable. It is just simply unsustainable. If we do not take bold action to promote economic fairness and economic justice, I have serious concerns for the continuation of our democratic values in this country. When taxpayers and Americans across the country see companies like Amazon paying a 0% federal income tax rate, that is just fundamentally unfair. So I do a few things. First and foremost, I would repeal the Trump tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans and for big corporations. I would also support a surtax on income over a certain level to make sure that we are investing in our people. I think an important thing we need to look at, though, is the way that we classify income. One of the reasons that Amazon is able to pay 0% isn't just because it's found a bunch of loopholes. It's because it's able to classify its income in a way that isn't taxed like income should be. So I think we need to look at fundamentally restructuring our federal income tax system, especially for corporations. What do we do that? I agree with Frank.
Thank you,
we need to
Mr.
invest
Harper.
in people, and we
Thank
need to
you.
use that to invest in our
Mr.
infrastructure.
McDermott, then Ms. Candelaria Reardon to close.
Thank you. I believe the Trump tax cuts only target the wealthy and the corporations, and I think they need to be repealed. And I think we need to take the savings from the Trump tax cuts and reinvest in America for once. Instead of investing in, Afghanistan or Iraq and rebuilding countries across the world, let's rebuild our countries right here in America, where our bridges are crumbling, where our roads are crumbling, where our cities have no answer for the huge mounting, deficits they face in the future for infrastructure repair. Let's put the men and women back to work of the Northwest Indiana building trades and building trades across America by rebuilding our country first, instead of spending our money across the world.
Ms. Candelaria Reardon to close.
Look, we know these policies are not trickling down. They're not trickling down. We see it when you've got teachers working 3 jobs because they can't earn enough money. We've seen it, this surplus at the state level even, built on the backs of people who are on 6-month waiting lists for mental health services, but we have a photo opportunity saying we've got $2 billion in the bank. These policies do not work. We need to fix the tax code so that everybody pays their fair share, and not just the working people of this country.
Thank you. Our next question. Part of President Trump's resilient appeal to evangelicals is his staunch promise to overturn Roe v. Wade through the court. Reproductive rights are under attack everywhere, from bans on second trimester abortions, heartbeat laws, fetal cremation, and many other draconian policies. What is your view on abortion policy? Question to Ms. Hake.
I can be real quick. I will support a woman's right to control her own body as long as there is breath in mine.
Candelaria Reardon, then Mr. Harper, then Mr. Mosby, then Ms. Borum to close.
So this war on women continues, and I don't even have to tell you what I'm going to do. You can look at my record. I have consistently opposed the cuts for Title X funding, which don't just pay for abortions. They pay for preventative health services, and we are penalizing clinics like Planned Parenthood for doing their job, planning parenthood, allowing people to plan parenthood. It's not all about abortion, but I do believe that this is the camel's nose under the tent, where they try to they try to put onerous exams on women, supply them with misinformation, generate ridiculous building codes for clinics. I mean, there's a whole list of things that they try to do that are absolutely ridiculous, and I have fought consistently in the State House against all of those things.
Thank you. Mr. Harper?
Yeah, I too am so troubled by the attacks that we are seeing, not only in Indiana, but across the country, not only on a woman's right to choose and to access abortion services, but also on a woman's right to access a whole health of reproductive health care services. So here's what I would do. I would do a few things. First and foremost, every vote that I cast in Congress would be towards standing up for Roe versus Wade and a woman's right to choose. And if there are things that we can do to make sure that states aren't making incursions on that, I will absolutely support it. It is also time that we repeal the Hyde Amendment, which is limited federal funding to women who just want to access basic reproductive health care services, and we absolutely need to restore Title IX. Finally, the Medicare for All plan that I support and that I will advocately support in Congress will cover reproductive health care services so that every woman and man in this country has full access to them.
Thank you. Mr. Mosby, then Ms. Borum to close.
All right, so I do support a woman's right to choose, and as I'm an educator, and I travel around Northwest Indiana speaking to 7th graders about abstinence. Now, one of the things that we have to understand that there's a lot of unplanned pregnancies, and that we need to educate our children better about the decisions they make and the consequences that happen. Now, me being from Illinois, I see too many readily available abortion clinics, and the supporting of a woman's right to be free. Now, understanding that we don't want to legislate a woman's body, but we have to really seriously think about if we are teaching children how to make better choices, that we won't have this issue about whether a woman's right to choose in unplanned pregnancies.
Ms. Borum to close.
So I definitely am pro-choice. And hands off my body and my uterus. It's not up for discussion. And also, as a board member for North Shore Health Centers, I think that it is important to enhance access to women for all of their reproductive services.
Our next question. The South Shore double tracking, Westlake extension, and the Dunes National Park designation are touted as a few of Congressman Visclosky's biggest recent accomplishments. As our next member of Congress, will you work to continue his efforts around those, or will you take a different approach? Question to Ms. Borum.
I would definitely work to support the double tracking in all of the projects that Congressman Visclosky had going. I think it is important for our economy, but I also think that it is important so that we have those jobs in our communities. I do not want those jobs to go across the border. And so I think that it is important that we skill up our workforce and make sure that they are able to work on all of the projects that we bring to Northwest Indiana, which is why I heavily emphasize transferable skills.
Ms. Candelaria-Reardon.
Thank you. I would absolutely continue the vision of the Marquette Plan. I started working for Congressman Visclosky in 1993, and it was one of my greatest pleasures in life to be able to shepherd in the South Shore Rail expansion to my community in Munster. I think it is what will transform our region. I think that we also have to, I know that part of the Marquette Plan also involves restoring wetland trails. That's something that the congressman has been interested in doing for a while. And so that's something that I will work towards in Congress. But also, I think that it helps us build, and I might have a 19-year-old daughter. I want her to be here raising her family. And this South Shore double tracking and the rail expansion allows us to keep our families close and raise them here.
Thank you, Mr. Mervan and Mr. McDermott.
So this.
No, we're good. The South Shore extension, what we have to understand is it is going to be a boom for our economy, especially when it comes to the transit-oriented development. There's going to be $2 billion worth of investment along that South Shore extension and double tracking. So if you're a resident of Gary, you're a resident of Miller, you're a resident of Hammond, you're going to benefit, and if you're a small business, you're going to benefit. If you're part of the construction trades, you absolutely, what these kinds of investments do for our economy is it allows union workers and steel to be produced and used in our community. And then secondarily, homeowners in Hammond, Gary, and Munster, their value goes up because now we have access to the 4th or 5th largest community or largest global economy in the world, Chicago. So you must be able to support those for our future. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McDermott.
Congressman Visclosky had some great initiatives that I plan to continue if I'm so lucky to be chosen as our next congressman. The Indiana Dunes National Park, wonderful designation. So glad they're finally getting the signs announcing that it's a national park. Marquette Plan, like Representative Candelaria-Reardon pointed out, wonderful. Giving us accessibility to the trails, accessibility to the lakefront, which means we also have to protect our lakefront. I think that was outstanding as well. The South Shore expansion, I participated on behalf of our city. Looking forward to the benefits it brings to the city of Hammond. But one thing that Congressman Pete does that I totally support, and I expand to make it better actually, is how he does his Congressman Day Out. It's similar to what I do in Hammond with Mayor's Night Out, where I go to each district after hours and have a debate that's open-ended, and we talk about the issues facing our city. I'm going to do that as your congressman. I'm going to make it a little bit better. I will have daytime appointments, but most of mine are going to be at night, so that the workers that that can't participate during the day can go as well. That's something Congressman Pete does currently. It's something I'm going to do as well, and I'm going to do it better because I'm going to be available at nighttime so I can talk to you after you get off work. Thank you.
Moving on from policy-related questions, a few of you have endorsed or have voiced support for one of the Democratic candidates for President of the United States. Are you endorsing anyone? Why or why not? Question first to, who did we leave off with? I think Mr. Mosby is next.
No, I have not endorsed a candidate yet. I made that mistake back when I was at Iowa State and I caucused for Bill Bradley, and Kerry won. And I was also there and present when Howard Dean did his infamous yay, whatever he did. So because of that, I'm gonna reserve the time, the moment to see, who actually breaks out. And so, no, I have not endorsed a candidate thus far. But I am disappointed that there isn't a true representation of diversity within this last round of candidates.
You, Mr. McDermott, and Mr. Farrar.
I've known Pete Buttigieg since he ran for treasurer in Indiana, and I helped him campaign in that. He was not successful. And then when he told me he was going to run for mayor of South Bend, I was a fellow mayor. I'd been mayor at that point for 6 years. And of course I helped Pete Buttigieg try to win in South Bend. And I was so happy for him when he won. And then he ran for re-election. I supported him then as well. Now he's running for president, and I'm questioning what the heck I'm doing with my life, right? But he called me up and said, Mayor, we've been together a long time. Can you support me? Can you endorse me in my run for president? And I was only one of 2 Hoosier mayors that came out early for Pete Buttigieg for president. I'm proud of it, and I'm looking forward to the day he walks into the White House.
Thank you, Mr. Farrar.
I support Bernie Sanders for president. The reason why is because his values reflect my values. This is who I've been since I've been growing up. I was a teenager talking about how we need universal health care. I've been talking about raising the minimum wage probably since I was in high school. So when eventually, 4 years ago, I saw this candidate for president who had all the same ideas I had, except he's been fighting for them for over a half century. This guy marched for civil rights in the 60s. He's consistently been right on all the issues as far as I'm concerned. And I have yet to see somebody speak who's running for president who I identify with so closely ideologically. I haven't made an official endorsement because, quite frankly, I'm just here as a candidate. I don't think anybody really cares if I make an official endorsement. But at some point, if they do, I will endorse Bernie Sanders, who I want more than anything to be the next president of the United States of America.
Thank you, Mr. Harper.
I noticed that initially this wasn't one of those questions that everybody up here is like, okay, hey, give me a second. I think that we are blessed as a party to have a wealth of well-qualified candidates who are going to take it to Donald Trump in November. Now, obviously, I have my preferences. I'm not, just like Ryan said, my endorsement doesn't matter one way or the other. And I think that the most important thing that we can be doing as candidates is to advocate for our vision for Northwest Indiana and the country over the next 3 or 4 months. But I will tell you this, whichever nominee our party chooses, whether I win this primary or not, I will be in Wisconsin in June, July, and in August. I will be in Michigan in September. My campaign will go out to Iowa in November. We will make sure that not only we're campaigning here, but there is an existential threat in this country. There is an existential threat in this country. And the most important thing that we can do is, as a party, to come together after the primaries are over to support the person who will take Donald Trump out of the White House and fight for progressive policy.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. Mr. Levan.
So I support Pete Buttigieg. And I went to South Bend and I was there. My story with him that's personal is when he ran for auditor. They were at a union hall in Maryville. He was about 26 years old. He fell asleep in the car because he was traveling all over the state trying to do that. I knocked on his window, talked to him and said, hey, if you need a place to stay at my house. He remembered that when I saw him. But my point in standing up is that I use the term support, not endorse, because I don't believe elected officials and political hacks. If they say I'm endorsing someone, I'm never going to underestimate the power of the voter. The power of the voter isn't with you. So do your due diligence to decide who you want to vote for. And coming close to home, when it comes to Congress, don't vote for someone because other elected officials are standing next to them. Vote for them for their content of the character and what they've accomplished. Thank you.
Our second to last question before closing statements. What do you believe most differentiates you from your opponents? And we're going to start with Mr. McDermott.
It's a great question. I ask myself that often. I'm a veteran. I'm the only one on this stage that raised my right arm when I was 18 years old and gave 6 years of my life to this wonderful country. I think it's important because I understand the president's role as commander-in-chief as the little guy that was getting sent out there to get slaughtered if it became necessary. I tell you, There's a lot of issues that are dealing with our country right now that a veteran can best understand. Veterans typically from the other parties, so I think I'm best able to work cross-party lines with bipartisanship is extremely important, and I know how to get things done. And you're sending me to Washington, D.C., hopefully, to help fix the broken system that is Washington, D.C. I'm looking forward to that challenge. Just like the day I raised my right arm and joined the United States Navy, I'm looking forward to raising my right arm in the Capitol and going to do war for Northwest Indiana to help make things better in the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tate and Ms. Congelario.
A number of things distinguish me from the other people who are running for office. For one, I am not a politician. I've never run for office before. I'm more of a visionary. I'm the only one up here who's expressed a plan for how to bring jobs to Northwest Indiana, and it's a plan that is supported on both sides of the aisle. Thousands of construction and steel jobs. I also have a plan for specifically barring dirty steel under the Paris Accords. We should not be allowing dirty steel coming from South Korea and China and Poland into our country at all. And think of how that would increase our steel jobs. When we start to make the casings for the wind towers as well, thousands of jobs will come to Northwest Indiana. We're just waiting. We need somebody with a vision. There's a lot of support for driving the green economy. You just need someone with a vision to do it. I have training in industrial background. I've studied in China, I've worked in China, and I've worked on trade deals. You need someone with a new vision instead of hiring, electing people who've been in office for years.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Ms. Congelario and Mr. Morgan.
Thank you. I am a wife, I am a mom, I'm a public servant, and I'm also an experienced lawmaker. I know what it is to work in a collaborative environment. Unlike some candidates probably here on the dais, as they run for Congress, they rewrite their history or change their minds. I have been a strong and steady advocate for the 12th District, and I hope to continue to be that advocate in the United States Congress.
Mr. Mervan, then Ms. Borum, then Mr. Mosby.
So what?
I'm a grunter. What differentiates me is my boots on the ground experience with real people and the ability to be able to connect with them. Legislatively, we were able to pass No More Secrets. When the unions went on strike at BP Amoco 7-1, I was there, boots on the ground, looking in the eyes of the steelworkers, making sure I understood and advocating for them with the Hardest Hit Fund. When it came to loss of jobs, I continuously used my office to be able to assist people to be able to be better educated and find new jobs. What differentiates me is I've looked in the eyes of violence, victims of violence, Ollie Hubbard and her daughter Lauren, and I've been able to do things in my office to be able to help them. And when you go to Washington, D.C., you've got to be able to bring people together and be able to find results. And you've got to be able to have the demeanor that once your issues are other people's issues, and listen to you and take that to Washington, D.C. And as your member of Congress, that's what I'm going to do.
Ms. Borum and Mr. Mosby.
I think what sets me apart from a few candidates on the dais is that I'm a lot like everyone in this room. My father is a school teacher of 35 years and my mother is a custodian. Extremely blue collar. I've worked really hard to put myself through law school. I couldn't call on anyone to get me in. It was on my merit. I walk by faith. I am extremely principle oriented. I do not waver with what is popular at the time. And so I think that holding a commitment, sticking to that commitment is important in continuing the work of Congressman Visclosky.
Thank you. Mr. Mosby to close.
What differentiates me from these candidates that I am the American dream. I've lived the pain that Senator Mervan has experienced through the lives of others. Growing up with nothing, my mother passed away of HIV/AIDS before I graduated college. And as I told you earlier, I went to college with a Pell Grant and $60 in my pocket. Didn't know how I was going to pay for school. And so being able to go to the middle of Iowa, and to meet people who love and care about everybody, humanity, and to help encourage and support me. And then to move my family from Illinois to come to Indiana. and to reinvent myself without any connections, with just trying to put my nose to the grindstone to make a better life for my family. And that's what differentiates me from everybody else on this dais.
For our 2-minute closing statement, since we're running short on time, we would like you to address what do you believe is the biggest issue facing the 1st District, and what is your plan to solve it? 2-minute closing statements. Please address that part of the question, and everyone will have a chance to respond in order. We're starting with Mr. Harper and going down the row.
We have a lot of big issues in Northwest Indiana, but we also have a lot of opportunities. Before I get to the issues we have, I think it's important that sometimes we give ourselves a little bit of a pep talk in Northwest Indiana. We get a little bit down on ourselves sometimes, but we have incredible resources here. It starts first and foremost with the people of Northwest Indiana, and I'm so excited to see all of you here today. We are one of the most diverse regions in the country. That diversity is our strength. We should be proud of it. It continues with the natural resources we have, with things like the natural dunes, with our national park and our dunes in the lakeshore. These are resources that we are incredibly blessed to have, and it further continues with being right next door to the 3rd biggest economy in this country. We should be proud of what we have here in Northwest Indiana, but certainly there are big challenges, and I think the biggest challenge that we have, and we share with everybody else, frankly, in this country, is how we're going to transform our economy over the next 20, 30, and 40 years in a way that is inclusive, in a way that lifts everybody up and doesn't just benefit a few people at the very top. That's why, obviously, we have to continue things like Congressman Visclosky's advocacy for expanding rail, his advocacy for the national park. But I think we need big progressive change at the national level for policies that are going to lift up everybody in this country. Things like Medicare for All to make sure that every American, including every Northwest Indiana resident, has health care. Things like fair pay legislation, so that if a worker comes from a state like Illinois or Michigan, or probably more Illinois than Michigan, where there are protections for paycheck discrimination, that they know that if they cross the jurisdiction into Indiana, it's not going to be legal to fire somebody because of their sexual orientation or because of their gender identity. We also need things like a $15 minimum wage that are going to lift up every worker in this region and in this country. I am confident that with progressive ideas, we can reform, remake our economy, and do it in a way that is going to lift up not only everybody in Northwest Indiana, but everybody in this country, and that is the
Thank
type
you,
of
Mr.
change
Harper.
that I would like to fight for in Congress. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Mr. Burbank.
So the biggest issue that we have is our economy. You've got everyone wants to live next door to a neighbor that's working and thriving. So I'm going to talk about something that I think is extremely important. The economy and vitality of Gary, Indiana. I want to make sure that our jobs are protected, our steel industry is protected, and we are investing in Gary, Indiana for the simple fact that we are recognizing that public safety is an issue and a congressman's got to be able to bring back grant money to help protect them. There's blight. You've got to be able to participate with Mayor Jerome Prince to make sure that we're participating in that and being dollars back for blight and economic development. We've got to be able to explore, that's all right. You've got to be able to maximize our ports, our airport, and our roads to bring in new industries, and you have to have a realistic view of that. The most important issue also to me is making sure that you have access to health care, because I've seen people go bankrupt. I've seen the look of uncertainty in their eyes, and also mental health. Part of the mass shootings, part of the school shootings is about mental health. As the North Township trustee, as an example, we have given clients access to mental health. And so what that does is that breaks down barriers. You've got to be able to create partnerships, and you've got to be able to bring people together. The biggest issues in Northwest Indiana is you've got to be able to work with all government entities to make sure that the federal government is thriving. We've got to be able to invest in our infrastructure so our union members are working, and you've got to be able to make our schools are absolutely producing the best students possible. I thank you all very much, and thank you for participating in this. It was an honor, and I'm glad you guys put this together. And this is what democracy is all about. When you're standing up here looking at all the faces, I know that you are very interested in trying to find someone who genuinely cares about you and is able to take your issues to Washington, D.C. I thank you very much.
Throughout my legislative career, I have have tried to have the best interests of Northwest Indiana at hand, whether it's in the economy or the healthcare industry or the access to healthcare, strong public schools. I think that they are the foundation for what we're trying to build here in Northwest Indiana. Our student population we need to invest in the human capital of Northwest Indiana, and we're not doing enough of that. I also believe that when you educate children, you open doors for them that were previously closed. I think that you have to build that foundation from the ground up. Healthy communities need access to health care. That's 400,000 Hoosiers participate in the Healthy Indiana Plan. Those Hoosiers have an opportunity to better their lives because they're healthy. They can work, they can study, they can better their lives. I think investing in the human capital of Northwest Indiana is essential as we move forward. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Mr. Farrar?
For me, it's always been education. It's always been all about education because our future relies on it. You know, when I grew up, I thought in the future, you know, in the year 2020, when that comes around, that everything would be revolutionized. We'd be doing things in a whole new, exciting way, technologically innovative, and yet, you know, I was an educator for a few years, and it's not happening. If anything, we move backwards. There's too many students in a classroom. Teachers aren't making enough money. They're not being supplied, okay? We have to fix our educational system. We don't just have to fix it, we have to innovate. We gotta invest in pre-K, something that's not happening nearly enough right now. We need colleges and public universities need to be tuition free. So every single person who aspires to a college education has access to get it. You know, we spend more money keeping people locked up in prison than we're spending on our students in schools. It's an outrage, right? We can always find enough money to fund the next war. Anything the Pentagon wants, it gets. It's an all-you-can-spend buffet of, you know, money for defense contractors and whoever else. But yet we can't invest in our schools. It's unacceptable. You know, at Congress, I'll fight to find any way I can to improve our education. I think teachers need to be allowed to teach and stop teaching to the test. I think we can invest in Title I to get more money in the classroom, right? Ultimately, I'd like to see classroom sizes come down, but if we can't do that right away, at least we can get more instructors in there. You know, I worked in Title I, and honestly, it was probably the best educational experience of my life, because in Title I, you get to work with students one-on-one and in small groups. Some of the kids I worked with, I did so good with them, or let me say I empowered them to do so well for themselves, I couldn't work with them anymore, because they were no longer at the bottom, so I got new students to work with. And it was an amazing process, and that's something we can invest in, and we need to do a whole lot more to improve education in this country. For the
Thank you,
sake of
Mr. Farrar. Ms. Hayden?
Thank you, and thank you again for coming. This has been an honor. I agree that economic development is key to our region, but income disparity is nothing new. It's been here as long as I've been here. I first discovered the dunes in 1997, and the per capita income gap between Gary and Hammond, which is somewhere in around 18,000, versus the more affluent areas, which are triple and quadruple that, that's nothing new. Everybody talks about jobs, but I brought a vetted plan that has bipartisan support and will expand the job and the role of the unions. It'll increase union jobs when we start making steel casings and the towers for wind and solar. Wind and solar isn't the future, it's here. Wind has surpassed $1 trillion on the global economy. We're importing all of our solar panels. We should be making those components right here. I want to drive federal resources to the region to upgrade our grid and upgrade our infrastructure. And by doing that, we will start attracting millennials and also refurbish our tax base. Because the #1 issue to people under 40 is the climate change. That, of course, is what's driving my economic proposal as well. But when you get your messaging right and start talking about the jobs that will come and the bipartisan support that's there for wind and solar manufacture and for spreading wind and solar developments in our region, it changes everything. Republicans support this, Democrats support this, people who understand that climate change is a threat to all of us support this, but it doesn't matter whether you agree with that or not, because everybody agrees with jobs. As your Congresswoman, my #1 priority will be to drive wind and solar and alternative energy. If we don't do that, in 5 years, the steel mills in Germany and in Sweden will be making steel with hydrogen, and we won't be able to compete with it. I have the industrial background to look ahead 10 years, and as your Congresswoman, that is what I will do. Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for being here. I definitely want to make sure everyone understands. Please do not be confused that economic development for all of the first congressional district is not good, was not good always until the congressional seat became available. And what I mean by that is when there was economic development opportunity for Gary, there were some people who did not support it. So let's be clear, economic development opportunity is not good for everyone all the time until you need their vote. I want to be clear about that. Second of all, I am fighting for a seat at the table. I think that for far too long, there have been a disparate treatment with certain individuals in this community, and I am fighting so that we can disseminate information and be a vessel for everyone. Everyone has the ability to thrive from the 1st Congressional District, and that's what I represent. I want to have equal pay for equal work. I think that it is important with women now becoming breadwinners that we are getting paid the same amount as men. I think that it is important that we build workforce development pipelines so that we can increase and enhance our property ownership in the 1st Congressional District. Thank you.
Mr. Mosby.
Yes, thank you all for spending your morning with us. It's been quite an honor. And thank you to the Young Dems as well. And so I think two of the biggest issues facing this region is education and transforming the economy. And so I'm going to start with transforming the economy. I think that when the steel industry and the manufacturing industry does go automation, that we be able to respond quickly with training the workers, displaced workers with new skills to be able to find new, better jobs. And secondly, with the education, the state should not be able to determine the winners and losers when it comes to school funding, period. And nor should your zip code. And so one of the things if I'm elected, I would propose, it's been proposed before in Congress, is a constitutional amendment, Constitutional Amendment 28, that guarantees every citizen a high quality education so that it's not a state can determine what kid loses or wins in this fight for everybody to have a great quality of life. In addition to that, I think that all teachers should have their student loans canceled after 5 years of teaching, period. Regardless if you're in a public school or private school. You know, my wife's a teacher, and that whole public service loan forgiveness, where you have to apply and do 120 payments, and you possibly will be approved to have your loans forgiven, I think that's absurd. And so I think that if you do that, if every child is afforded a right to a high quality education, you can attract the type of teachers that Gary needs, sorely needs, that Hammond needs with the closing of their schools because of funding and population loss. That it wouldn't just be, the Lake Central or that is thriving because they have a great tax base. And I think that is something that we definitely need to look at, because if we are bringing new families in, they're looking at education. When me and my wife moved over here, we looked at schools all over the region and decided where we're going to live.
Mr. Mosby.
So thank you for your time. Wendell Moses.
Mr. McDermott.
Thank you to the Young Dems for putting on this great debate. Thank you to everybody that showed up. What a wonderful morning we all had. The question was, what's the most pressing issue right now in Northwest Indiana? And I tell you, I agree mostly with Frank's proposal. We're talking about what's going on in Gary right now, but particularly the unacceptably high violent crime rate we have in the 1st Congressional District is something that needs to change. We could put all the money in the world into Gary, Indiana right now, and unless we could solve the unacceptably high violent crime problem facing that city in particular, not just that city I've been mayor of. I've been mayor for 16 years, and that's my main job in Hammond. My main job in Hammond is getting the trust of the police force and giving them the tools that they need so that they go out there and do the job. And they have. Look at the numbers since I've taken over in Hammond. We're going in the right direction. It's not utopia, but we're going in the right direction. Look what happened to our neighbors in Chicago when the police force lost faith in their mayor and they stopped doing their jobs. And look what happened there. We need to get on top of this problem, facing Gary in particular, facing Northwest Indiana. It's our most pressing matter. You know, over the last 10 years, I looked at a chart in the Northwest Indiana Times, and Gary's had unfortunately, over 50 murders per year in the city. You add that up over 10 years, that's 500 people, and now Gary's got to go out and count people for the next census, and unfortunately, we're losing a lot of those people to violent crime. We have to do something about this, and we all know we have to do something about this. I think Gary's got an amazing mayor. I think Gary's heading in the right direction. Gary certainly needs the congressman's help, but Gary needs all of our help. We all got to buckle down and help solve this violent crime problem facing Northwest Indiana. And I know how to do it because I've been doing it for 16 years. And if I'm elected your congressman, I'm going to be a mentor to the mayors and a good example to the police force so that they know at least our congressman's got our back and the congressman's trying to help our mayor. And we're going to get on top of this problem together. Thank you all very much.
That concludes our event for today. Lake and Porter County Young Democrats encourages you to get involved beyond today's event by helping candidates organize in your community. Thank you all for coming, and we hope you enjoyed this discussion. Let's give our candidates a round of applause for their participation today.
Just got elected.